A shocking brawl erupted at a Majorca beach club, with family fighting bar staff with stools
in a bloody brawl that lasted 15 minutes in Majorca.
Alcoholism has a long-lasting and hugely damaging effect on the brain.
People have been known to sober up and not really know who they are.
This bill is not about bears. We keep saying it. We love bears. Bears are cute and cuddly. We're talking about the ones that are on crack and they break your door down and they're standing in your living room growling and tearing your house apart. So when you run into one of these crack bears, you should be able to shoot it. Crack bears. Crack bears. Crack bears.
All right. Bow! Ladies and gents and everything in between. How's it going? What's going on out there? Welcome to episode 297, guys, of Aid Thompson and Other Disappointments. I'm your host, of course, Aid Thompson, or what is left of him, as I continue to plot a course through my detox from alcohol. Long-time listeners, veterans of the show, will be acutely aware that occasionally, in my lesser moments, / a completing part of my entire identity, has been alcohol. For a long time, I've enjoyed a spot of alcohol on this show. Have I got any beers lying around? I've got like, just out of shot here, I've got about 16 beers. I've got another crate down here. Another crate just turned up the other day. This is how much I enjoy my craft ales, guys. Everyone has their poison, their vice. You know, some people roll themselves up a fat bifter to relax and ease the anxiety of the modern world and indeed the formerly Great Britain. Others are partial to a bottle or two of wine. Perhaps that's you. Others are, you know, more partial to the crack pipe and maybe going out and murdering a few hookers. Whatever it is that you do to ease the stress, whatever your literal vice is, for me it was alcohol. And I've decided to take a break from it. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram recently, I've been posting memes about this sort of thing, about how, you know, once you let go of alcohol and the alcohol is no longer there clouding your brain, suddenly, do you know what comes marching up to the front? It's not like clarity of thought. It's not like a nice return to who you were 25 years ago before you dove headfirst into alcoholism. No, it's actually all of your unresolved mental health issues now come marching to the front. Like a marching band, bashing cymbals. Hey, Aid. Think you forgot about us? Yeah, all of those insecurities that you had when you were 15, that you first started pouring booze all over, when you came of age. Well, I'm delighted to tell you, Aid, they're still here. You've just been drowning them out, literally drowning them out. For decades, but now, oh yeah, no, we're still very much alive and kicking, Aid. How have you been? So yeah, I've been well, the last 2 weeks. Literally, I was on the verge of tears on Sunday. I can't explain it, guys. Can't explain it at all. It takes a lot for me to cry. I've cried maybe twice in the last 10 years. Once was when I thought we were on the verge of losing our house, which I think is, you know, forgivable. And then the other time was when we were driving home. I was driving home with the kids. It was some sort of like long distance drive type thing or situation. And again, similar kind of thing. I thought I was going to lose my job or something. I can't even remember what the ins and outs of that situation were now, but it was serious kind of stuff, like all falling on my shoulders, and I could just feel myself welling up. So twice in the last decade. Both of them kind of family responsibility type situations. But this last Sunday, what was I actually upset about? It is literally the only thing I could think of is that it is the chemistry in my brain adjusting, trying to level out to no longer having this sort of synthesized endorphins, thing going on, that it is, waiting all over this side, getting rid of the sadness, and then it will come back this way. And yeah, it's been a wild ride the last few days. Tell you the truth, guys, dear listeners, dear viewers, I've only actually felt semi-normal at kind of this morning, all through the weekend. I just felt absolutely horrendous, oh my God, is this actually who I am? When I'm not either half cut or hungover, somewhere in between those two parameters is Ade Thompson and his actual personality. Is this who I am? This entire time I've always been half cut, and so, a little bit upbeat, or really hungover, and so, a little bit morose, but then it kind of wears off. Once you remove those two states, this is what you're left with. This is the reality of who I am? I have to be this guy? Is this how sad existence actually is? I wondered to myself as I sat there, trying not to make my bottom lip wobble. Telling my kids, you know that Daddy loves you, right? Just trembling. Anyway, so yeah, it's been a fun few days, guys. Some of you will be wondering, is he okay? Is he all right? I'm perfectly fine. I'm okay. Just somewhat fascinated by my mental state, my mental health at the moment, but I'm totally able to manage this and plot a course through it, guys. What's going on out there anyway? Should we talk about politics? I mean, that's why you're here, right? Maybe you found me through the alternative paper review. Maybe you're one of the very few people out there who still see me on TikTok. Such is the extent to which I have been, I guess the kids call it shadow banned, don't they? I don't know if I've been shadow banned or if I just really suck now on there, if I just can't be bothered to put in the effort and post every day, But maybe you're one of the few people that have found me on there. Maybe you've been following me on Twitter. Maybe you saw me shared by Super Tansky or, whoever else. And maybe you're here to check out a little bit of political content. So, let's get into it, shall we? What's happened? What has taken place over the last few days? Obviously, we've got Kamala Harris, who is looking odds-on favourite to take the Democratic Party's nomination for president in the run-up to the November elections over in the US. Meanwhile, over here, of course, we've got the Labour government still kind of finding their feet, right? Seen a few success stories, I think. They're taking ownership of the asylum situation. They've written off a load of North Sea oil exploration licenses. They've greenlit a load of windmill farm things for renewable energies. We're looking at, what was it I read the other day? Micro or small nuclear power plants to kind of mitigate the risk, but also amp up the renewable energy that we can benefit from. Cheaper renewable energy here in the UK. It's all looking very positive, I think, for our centre-left Labour administration. But I noticed what the press are doing now, the majority right-wing press. This is quite clever, right? I noticed what they were doing this morning when they're talking about the asylum backlog, and the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is now forced to reckon with this backlog, right? What they're doing now, the right-wing rags, is they're finally acknowledging that there is an issue with things like that. They're looking at, 70,000 refugees. What are you going to do with them? It's well, hang on a second. 3 months ago, you weren't even talking about this. 3 months ago, this was never an issue. You were too busy cheerleading and celebrating the Illegal Migrations Act, making it a criminal offence to enter the UK via small boat, and then you would bloat out the asylum system and they wouldn't know what to do with you because you entered illegally, so you can't claim asylum, but we can't send you back because that breaks international law, etc., etc. So 3 months ago, you weren't talking about this like this is actually an issue. Now it's a Labour administration. Suddenly it's a problem. Now you want answers. And I think you're going to see this more and more over the coming months. I think they're going to start to acknowledge problems in policies that they cheerled on when they were implemented by the Conservatives, except now it's like Labour's problem. Suddenly Labour will get the blame for these things. I truly think that's where we're headed. You know, so think of some of the problems that the Tories introduced. I know it's not difficult. I know there's a lot of them to choose. It really is like a sweetie shop. Just treat yourself. Think of one or two issues that the Conservative Party introduced to the government's portfolio, you know, whether it's Ministry of Defence, healthcare, housing, whatever. Treat yourself, right? I'll just pick two off the top of my head. You ready? Here we go. The Tories implemented Brexit and immigration controls, and they've made it almost impossible to adequately staff the NHS and indeed the teaching sector. Teaching applications are down by something like a third, or maybe it was 2/3, I can't really remember. But the teaching sector has been hugely adversely affected by immigration controls. So, if the Tories implemented immigration controls and Brexit, and it made it harder for Europeans to come over to plug that gap, that is going to manifest now within right-wing tabloid circles as a failure by Labour to adequately staff the NHS and the education sector. You're going to see Express headlines, Mail headlines, Telegraph headlines about Labour's failure to hire enough nurses, or Labour's education shame, Labour's schools shame. It'll be a shorter word than education, won't it? You know, for most of these tabloids. Labour's schools shame. It'll be like classrooms with kids at like 40 plus sizes, you know, too many kids per classroom. Why can't Labour attract teachers? Labour will get the blame for the stage that was set by the Conservatives. That is what's happening here. The Conservative Party failed to build sufficient numbers of houses for 14 years, thereby perpetuating, exploding the housing crisis. They also reneged on putting in protections for private renters. They didn't build any social housing. The housing crisis, it's not totally the Conservative Party's fault because, you know, New Labour sort of started that off, and also you could definitely make a case that deregulating the pensions and allowing people to take out huge chunks of money that they would then buy a one-bedroom flat with, etc., etc. It's not all the Conservative Party's fault. But they certainly haven't helped for 14 years. And yet, I can almost guarantee that, you know, sometime in the next 6 months or a year, Labour will get the blame for this also. It'll be a Sun dispatch from a council estate in Lincolnshire or something. Be like a Labour-led council. And then here's the kicker, right? Is they'll say, well, when the Tories were in, it was never this bad. It's like, yes! Because they set the stage. It's like pushing a boulder down a hill. It's like it's gathering. Who started the boulder? Who pushed the boulder onto you, love? I just wish that we could go back to the days when the boulder was only 20 feet down the hill. I mean, that seemed comparatively quite good. Good old days. You know, it's like harking, but it's like you've just had all of your limbs torn off by a big grizzly bear. And you're like, I mean, I actually quite missed the moment when I'd only had my arm torn out of the socket. Could we go back to just having one arm torn out of my socket? How about the national debt would be another good example, right? The Tories allowed the national debt to explode, right? We all know this. I've talked about this a lot before on the podcast. The national debt a few years ago was sort of, you know, it was high, but it was still manageable. Under the Tories, it's gone over 100% of our GDP. Some of that was COVID. You know, they like to wheel that one out. They say, well, you know, who could have predicted a pandemic where we would have to pay people to stay in their houses rather than go to work. It's a global pandemic. Who could have seen that coming? And to some extent, I accept that. To some extent, I'm like, well, okay. You know, it probably was the safest thing to do, to keep people from mixing, keep people in their houses, protect the older generations who were more likely to, you know, catch it and die, and etc., etc. But there was still a lot of expense there that was just, I mean, £37 billion for that app. That inquiries and studies have all established had minimal to totally negligible impact on how we manoeuvred our way through the pandemic. So £37 billion. That is like bailout money. That is an obscene amount of money to be spending on that Serco app and even the infrastructure around it. So 37 billion. Then you've got the 12 billion fraud that they didn't want to investigate. Then we've got like all the money, like the Michelle Mone stuff. All of the other government contracts that had absolutely nothing to do with the pandemic. I mean, whilst we're on the subject of the pandemic, we had the PPE, like the fast lane stuff also, right? Maybe there's some overlap with some of this stuff, but you get my point. There was still an obscene amount of corruption, profiteering, basically looting. Can we just call it looting? Stealing money from the public coffers. And all of this money has to be accounted for, right? Like, you can magic the money and allocate it to certain areas of the treasury, you know, health, defence, whatever. But it still has to ultimately be accounted for and paid back through the bond market, through gilts and interest, etc. So when we talk about, like, the national debt and the mess that the Tories made of it, and then we look at it through the context or this paradigm of now, like, retrospectively, finally acknowledging that there might be a problem with this and saddling the blame on Labour. Like, how is that going to get marketed back to Labour? It's going to become their problem now. They are going to get the blame for this through the Express, the Mail, the Telegraph, your Nick Ferrari, your Koonsbergs. How are they going to market that back to Labour and Labour voters and try to get everyone to blame Labour for this? Like, they're not going to acknowledge that there was an obscene amount of waste and corruption in the pandemic, after it, before it. They're not going to look at that. That's just, you know, the Tories have a right to that money. Them and their cronies and their donors and all of that infrastructure and ecosystem, all of that, we couldn't possibly acknowledge that. So they're not going to do that. What they will do is look at the national debt over here. It's swollen, it's colossal. And then here's what they're going to do. They're going to look at whatever Labour are now allocating money to, like right now, wind farms, nuclear power plants, whatever it is, and then they're going to misrepresent and contort and reframe it and push it back like, oh, that is why the national debt is so high. That's why your taxes have to go up. That's why everything is in such a state, guys. Not through 14 years of economic, fiscal and monetary mismanagement by the Tories and obscene corruption. No. That's old news. Why are you looking back? No. We're talking about Labour here, guys. It's Labour's obscene overspending. That's why the national debt is in such a state. When will you voters learn you can't trust Labour with the economy? Like, I'll tell you what it's like, right? If you want a metaphor, that's what we do on this show, isn't it? Some of the metaphors are more appropriate than others, I think. It's fair to say. But if you want a metaphor for what is going on, right? So they take a bad thing that the Tories have done, and then they contort it and they saddle the blame on Labour, right? It's a bit like sometimes I'll moan to my girlfriend about, you know, our finances, about how, you know, we shouldn't be spending this much on subscriptions, on Netflix, on, like, I'm basically a Telegraph to myself. Like, oh, if we didn't spend all this money on your bloody avocados and your Netflix, then we wouldn't be in this mess. But sometimes I'll moan to my girlfriend about our finances. And then, like 2 days later, she'll have a pop at me because I've gone to Sainsbury's and I didn't take plastic bags with me. And she's like, you're always moaning about money, but then look, you've gone to Sainsbury's without any plastic bag, and now they're going to charge you for all of the new plastic bags. I'm like, the plastic bags are not the reason that we don't have any money. Are you high? Like, I've got £3,000 on my credit card because you want to go away on a motorhome long weekend with the kids. I'm not broke because I've spent an extra 35 pence on plastic bags. Fuck out of here. That's what it's like. It's like, the Tories have blown tens of like, what's the most recent one? It's the Rwanda policy. They were planning on spending £10 billion on the Rwanda scheme over the next few years. 10 billion. Do you know how many asylum processing centres you could set up for £10 billion? You could house them all and give them all their own individual public services, lest they overrun our public services, etc., etc. Right? 10 billion on that. 12 billion COVID fraud, 37 billion for the Circo app, etc., etc. You understand the point that I'm getting at, right? Is if Labour spend, 500 million on this and 70 million on that, that is not the reason that the national debt is so colossal. But you will absolutely see that, I can promise you. Let's move on. There is a story that I would like to share with you this evening, Tuesday night at time of recording. A story that popped into my feed the other day, and I thought, this is a story that needs to be told. This is in the same way that those stories from your aunt apparently need to be told. I'll just babble this one out as well. Except not jacked up on gin. So anyway, this is in The Guardian. It's the story of animal intuition, guys. It's a story of intelligence in the wilds of America. A lot said of the intelligence that can be found in cows and dolphins from the animal kingdom, isn't it? Dolphins are so intelligent, in fact, that they've worked out that having orgies is a pretty good use of your time, by all accounts. Which is true. I'm not even making that up. There's been scientific studies. I don't know who came up with the idea for that study. Like, this is something that we need to establish. Do dolphins fuck each other? But somebody has established that is what dolphins do sometimes. They get horny and they do things to each other. Anyway, dogs, dolphins, cows, all celebrated for their intelligence. But none of them can compare or compete with the latest instance of proof of intelligence in the animal kingdom. May I present to you guys? I feel like I'm a circus MC or something, May I present to you? Put on my hat, grab my whip. May I present to you guys the paragon of animal intelligence here. The depressed bear, ladies and gentlemen. The depressed bear. This is from The Guardian. And the headline says, Florida police tell people to stop taking selfies with depressed black bear. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I love this bear. I am totally on his level. I am. I don't know what he's going through. No idea. Or which other animals told him about, maybe climate change and nuclear war is upon us, and it's some sort of, fucked up dystopian version of the Lion King or the Jungle Book, and they're all dancing around him, singing songs about how fucked everything is. Hey there, necessities, I hate to be cynical, but the land that we live off will soon be unlivable. Something like that. Or maybe he's just figured out that bears have their own credit system and housing crisis or something. Just clearly very depressed, this bear. I don't know what he's going through, but I can relate. But whatever it is, here he is, slumped at the side of the road by a telephone pole, And the people who pass him in cars find it so comical, so funny, that they're taking selfies with him, getting out of their cars and their trucks, like, oh my God, look at this. Let me get a story. Let me get a story real quick. And what I love about it is, like, it sounds like something that your one kind of, chunty mate, got to be careful now for the monetization, your one chunty mate might do. Like, everyone's got a friend that pushes it just a little too far, that's a little bit too much of a chunt sometimes, right? It sounds like something that, like, ad hoc one guy might do one time, doesn't it? But actually, it turns out so many people were doing this. So many people, like, driving past, like, Chet, you gotta slow down. You gotta slow right down, bro. I'm gonna take a selfie with that broken-hearted bear. Did you see him? Look at him. It's the funniest shit I've ever seen. Like, let her go, bro. Let her go. There's plenty more fish in the stream. Yo, Brittany, go give him a hand job, man. He's sad. And Brittany's like a cheerleader in the backseat. You're such an asshole, Craig. Like, you can imagine that being the situation, right? But just like a one-off. Just one time, one kid might be like that. But no, apparently this was happening so often that the cops had to put out a thing saying, like, could you motherfuckers just stop? Could you just stop taking selfies with the depressed bear, please? Like, it's not safe. One of you is going to end up in the paper from dying from a stupid thing for Instagram, and nobody's going to have any sympathy for you. Nobody. You're going to be in the weird news section of newspapers from, like, the US, the UK, Australia, the world over. People are going to look at your death as a funny, offbeat story to lighten their day, if not podcast with. And here's the really fucked up part. Your family are going to be sad and depressed. They'll be like, they are the bear. And now everybody else is going to be the you, gliding on by, laughing at the situation. Anyway, so they put out this notice, and this is in Texas. And they're like, don't feed the bear. There's a lot of them around. Don't approach it. Don't crowd them. It's very dangerous. Bears can be incredibly dangerous, they were saying. And here's a line that I love, right? It's a quote from a Texas congressman. It's a guy called Jason Shoaf. Never heard of him before, but whatever. He's a Republican. And he says that there's such a problem with bears now. There's such a problem with bears coming into, like, populated areas that he, a keen hunter, by the way, let's just bank that for a minute. He has been left with no choice but to draw up a bill allowing Texans to shoot these things, these bears, point blank, if they so much as stumble onto your lawn looking for food, right? And he was pushed, right? He was pushed on what's driving this change in the law. Why are you going with this bill, right? Everybody knows about bears. Everybody knows not to crowd them. This is America. Generally, if you stay out of their way and you call the authorities, you call the bear catcher, they will come and they'll trap them and they'll, collect them, and then they rewild them out in the woods. So why are you encouraging shooting them? Is that necessary? Was how they pushed this Republican Congressman Jason Shoaf. And here's what he says, right? He says, bears are high on crack and tearing people apart in their living rooms. Which is just, I mean, it's so far out there. It's like they asked him for examples of times when that had happened. Like, has that ever happened even once? And he came up with precisely zero. He didn't even respond to the request from the journalists. we've got to do something about these bears, man. They're getting high on crack, and they go into people's living rooms. They tear them from limb to limb. Really? Okay. Yeah, it's a real problem. Can you name any times that's I'm really busy right now, okay? Absolutely incredible to just go that far out there. I mean, do you know what it's like? It's like when you have a kid. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. And when you ask them what happened, like when something got broken, you say, who broke the plant? Who broke the mirror? Who smashed the plate? And they immediately come up with some far-fetched, utterly ridiculous story. You did, Dad. When you were hammered last night, you were crying about who you are. You lost your identity to alcohol, and you don't really understand who you... And then you tripped over the plate and you smashed... Do you not remember? Oh, that sounds ridiculous. Try harder. You're ADHD. You're supposed to be creative. But yeah. Anyway, apparently it's a real problem in Texas. Bears are finding their way into people's houses and attacking them and tearing their limbs up. Isn't that strange? Because earlier I was talking about grizzly bears tearing limbs off, and you want to go back to the time when you only had one limb torn off you. Like I probably should have done a joke there, shouldn't I, to tie the two of them in? But I mentioned earlier, I'm coming down off alcohol. My joke cogs and synapses are not firing perhaps as quickly as they once might have. What else is going on? Let's talk a little bit about. Should we do American politics or should we do UK domestic? Actually, do you know what? Here we go. Like this is a story that has also caught my eye today. Less politics today, more just weird, kooky, ad hoc. This is on the Mail Online, and the headline is "Shocking Moment: Brawl Erupts at Majorca Beach Club with family fighting staff with bar stools, leading to 3 arrests and several injuries." How can you not be just drawn in to this story, this Brits Abroad tale of wonder? Let's get into it. Men can be seen throwing punches and hurling chairs at each other. It says, "This is the moment a brutal bar brawl erupted at a Majorca beach club after a drunk partygoer who was asked to leave the premises attacked members of staff and called his family for backup, leaving several injured. Footage shows shirtless men, obviously. That's how you know it's Brits. Don't you? As soon as the temperature goes above 17, out come the shorts, off go the shirts. Like, it never ceases to amaze me. Like, I saw a guy yesterday in the garage close to us. I was in there with my daughter. She wanted a Baby Bell. I wanted a fridge milkshake or something. Wasn't even that hot. It was about 24, maybe. Like a nice summer's day, but not unbearably hot. Not, I must disrobe. It's too hot to wear a t-shirt hot. And in comes this guy, 52, 55 years old maybe, pretty overweight, pretty hairy, tattoos everywhere, walks in without his shirt on. I'm like, who is this for? Like, why? Why is this necessary? Shooting the teetotal bears who haven't touched crack and haven't ever torn anybody's limbs off, shooting them for no reason is still, there's more reason to do that than there is for you to take your fucking shirt off, pal. There is more reason to murder a pacifist bear who is just sitting there by the telephone pole, minding his own business. He'd probably kill himself. If you left a 12 gauge next to that depressed bear, he probably would have done the job for you. There's more reason to kill him than there is for you to take your fucking shirt off, you bellend. It says, footage shows shirtless men in swimming trunks throwing punches at El Peñon. Am I saying that right? El Peñon? Beach bar staff, as well as hurling chairs over their heads. One topless man and a man in an apron can be seen charging at each other as others try to break up the rampage. But other men soon began to join in on the brawl. I mean, you would want to join in, wouldn't you? It's like sort of seeing a pool party or a game of volleyball or something. If you're on holiday in Majorca, you see a brawl kicking off, Brits Abroad. Why not jump in? Get in on a bit of the action. Onlookers can be heard screaming as the fight continues, with staff members also seen launching chairs to defend themselves. It says the fight broke out on Saturday night. A guy was intoxicated. He was thrown out for rowdy behaviour. But it says he and his family were allegedly celebrating a party on the beach next to the bar. I love that they've bothered to put that down as allegedly. They were allegedly celebrating a party. We don't want to get sued. This could be libelous. Guys, don't ever accuse someone of celebrating a party. You got to be so careful about that. They were allegedly celebrating a party on the beach next to the bar when the man and several of his relatives entered the premises to use the toilet. Oh my goodness. The man, who local media have identified as a member of a well-known gypsy clan, which, you know, you or I might sort of go, well, why is that relevant? But this is the male, remember. He had started bothering customers and waiting staff before being asked to leave by the owner. But he allegedly reacted to the owner's request violently and called on his family for backup, which resulted in the spat getting out of control. So he goes to the toilet, and a couple of his mates do, family or whatever. They use the toilet. They had been celebrating on the beach. They go into this place. They take a shit or a piss. They start bothering people, you know, perhaps telling them how good their shit was or something. Oh, I've just dropped a right stinker in there. People go up to the owner. They're like, oh, you know, these guys, they keep bothering us. The owner comes over and goes, look, you guys need to fuck off, okay? Stop telling people about the piss that you just took or whatever. It says, according to local outlet Diario de Mallorca, multiple people who tried to intervene were injured, including a member of staff who was hospitalised after having a bar stool hurled at his head. 3 Spanish men aged 48, 42 and 43 were arrested on charges of violent disorder, assault and death threats. Wow. And it says, apparently, like, whilst all of this was kicking off. By the way, it's obvious that they're not Brits, after all. You know, here I was, you know, hating on my country, saying that it was quite obviously Brits Abroad. What do I know? There's a quote here. I mean, it's the Daily Mail, right? So you don't know how accurate this is, but apparently they've got a quote. It says, this was shouted while the brawl was going on by the people, right? We are gypsies from Son Banya. More than 50 of us are coming, and we will kill you all, they shouted. Apparently, deliberately incriminating themselves. I mean, that must have been terrifying, right? That must have been terrifying. Just put yourself in the position of those diners for a minute. You know, you're at the restaurant, having a few drinks, the weather's nice, you're overlooking the beach. There's a slightly rowdy group allegedly partying on the beach. You know, I don't want to incriminate myself or cast aspersions on these people. They seem to reciprocally, they don't really care about incriminating themselves, do they? We are gypsies from the blah, 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 and we will come here and murder you all, he said. They don't seem, they're a lot more relaxed about this stuff than I am, clearly. They were allegedly partying on the beach. You're sat there, you're having a nice drink with your wife, your kids, perhaps. And then these guys come up and they just storm the restaurant and use the toilet and start bothering everyone, you know. And then they start threatening everyone. We will come back and kill you all. That must have been absolutely terrifying, guys. And you know what? I don't mind admitting that maybe in that setting, maybe I may have lobbied to loosen hunting regulations. Made up some stories about, oh, they're all high on crack going into people's living rooms. Get me my gun. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, in all seriousness, like, if that was me, if I was in that restaurant in the state that I'm in right now, coming down of decades of alcoholism, coming down, trembly and twitchy as I am, like just feeling insecure and not really sure of myself and a bit twitchy. And like, if somebody stormed into the restaurant that I was in and they started threatening to get, like, I'd still be trembling, but there would be a little part of my brain that would be like, am I actually scared? Am I twitching? Do I feel nervous about this? Or am I just feeling exactly the same as I was the previous 12 hours of today? Am I scared? Or is this just who I am? Like, honestly, like, putting me in that restaurant as people storm in there, putting me in that restaurant in the like with the mental state that I have right now, that would be like putting an army veteran with PTSD onto a fucking ghost train. Like, who the fuck is this? Like, well, it's a fun and relaxing time for you, eh? It doesn't feel like it. I mean, what does it say about Brits? Let's just go back to that for a minute. What does it say about Brits abroad and our reaction to hot weather? That when I read a news story like this about people who are shirtless, hanging like with their swimming trunks on, getting into a bar brawl because they've had too much because they were heavily intoxicated. What does it say about Britain and my perception of it that I immediately run to the assumption that this was Brits Abroad? Even though it's not. Even though it is some murderous, I want to say gypsies because that's what they've called them. I suppose I should call them travellers, right? Some murderous travellers. That's the level that I'm pitching everyday Brits at when they go abroad and the weather is above 17 degrees and there's a few too many sangrias. What does it say about us? That is the assumption that I run to. Well, I'll tell you what it says. It says that I personally have lived through too many experiences of Brits abroad and Brits abroad that are acting like Brits abroad but at home. Not even Brits abroad. I've had too many negative experiences of Brits in hot weather, having had too many beers. I've had too many that I now recognise the trademarks when I see them. And actually those trademarks are being infringed by the Spanish traveller community. And frankly, I don't care if the traveller community don't have a pot to piss in. If all they've got is that wagon, I'm coming after you for infringing on our Brits Abroad trademarks, guys. I will take your wagon. It's a weird ending to this episode, isn't it? Make a good title for it, though. Maybe I'll call it that. I will take your wagon. There you go. If you see the title, and this whole time you've been like, why has he called it this? Now you know, right? Now you know. Right, that's it for this one. Thanks so much for continuing to tune in. If you're enjoying the paper reviews in the morning, I put those out most days. I do a podcast twice a week. Usually I record it on a Tuesday night, like tonight, and I put it out Wednesday. It always goes out to Patreons and YouTube community backers first for 2 days, and then it goes out to everybody else. The Friday night show, I do it live, so you can tune in for it live at 7:30 every Friday, but then immediately afterwards it goes on to private and out to Patreons again for 2 days. Have I got any guests on this week? I don't think I have. I've had so much fun doing solo shows, live streams by myself, just me and the live chat people, that I haven't bothered booking guests for ages, but maybe I should pull my finger out and book a few more for Friday nights, mix it up a little bit. What else have we got coming up for the Patreons, man? I've got, if you've not jumped on the Patreon or the YouTube community yet, do consider it. It starts at only like £3 a month, so it's super cheap, and you get access to the Discord. I pop in there most days. We talk about life, love, the universe, politics, dystopia, despair, and awfulness. There's also in-person meetups. I just did one of those a couple of weeks ago, in which I met up with Dickie Bow and Distract. I'll probably do another one in 2 or 3 months. Yeah, I guess that's it. If you're up for the Patreon and YouTube's community thing, jump on that. If not, maybe next time. That's it for this one, though. I've got to go. Keep it #Booge. Keep it Binfluencer. And I am out this motherfucker.